Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be taking you through my digital art process step by step. I'm starting with the sketch and then moving into color blocking, rendering, and final details while explaining what I'm doing along the way. I'll also share why I make certain choices, like colors, lighting, and layers. This is the same process I personally follow in most of my artworks. So if you're interested in digital art or want to improve your workflow, I hope this video is helpful for you. So, I started with a vertical guideline to determine the angle of the face. Then I used rough lines to understand the face shape. After that, I worked on defining the basic structure of the face and resized it because it looked a bit too big. Next, I added the neck and ears. Finally, I made some basic markings for the eyes and the nose. I worked on the clothing and roughly estimated the eye shape and size to better understand the proportions. I also refined a few more facial features. Keep in mind that all of this is just rough work. Nothing is permanent or highly detailed at this stage. Along the way, I made several adjustments and added some initial hair shapes. I softly erased certain areas so I could start working on details while still keeping some guidelines. Then, I began defining the facial features in more detail, focusing on understanding the structure and shapes. I added eye bags and subtle wrinkles to give the skin more realism. I also lowered the facial features slightly, as they felt positioned too high before. After that, I added the eyebrows and did a bit more detailing on the hair. With that, the sketch is almost complete, and we can now move on to the coloring process. I created a new layer beneath my line art layer and filled the entire canvas with a dark, desaturated blue. Then, I started adding spots of darker blue, along with some lighter blue tones and a few touches of desaturated orange. This gives the feeling that the character is standing at an event, with people in the background. I also blurred the background, so the focus naturally shifts toward the character. Next, I selected the skin area to begin color blocking, starting with a dark orange base tone. After selecting the region, I added slightly darker values within the skin area to create depth. I also color blocked the ears, hair region, and clothing. Then, I started working on the hair by adding texture. I painted individual hair strands along with some unaligned strands to make it look more natural. For this, I used a hard brush so the strands appear more defined and don't wash out with other elements. I temporarily hid the background because its similar values made it difficult to judge the hair shape clearly. Once the hair was done, I lightened the background slightly, since it was blending too much with the character's values. This adjustment helps guide the viewer's eyes directly toward the character. Next, I moved on to working on the skin. First, I marked the highlight areas of the face and then blocked in the midtones. By going back and forth between light and shadow, I gradually defined the overall face shape. I used darker shadows to create a stronger sense of depth. I also added some blush to make the face feel more alive. Along with the blush, I introduced a bit of subsurface light scattering to give the skin a natural glow. If you're not familiar with that concept, you can check out my video on color theory. Coming back to the rendering, I added a few brighter highlights on the face and reduced some overly strong shadows that weren't necessary. After that, I continued refining the skin with more detailed rendering. I then worked on the neck by adding simple highlights and shadows. Since the neck is essentially a cylinder, the shading process is quite straightforward. After finishing that, I returned to the face area to continue refining the details. I reduced the opacity of my line art layer because it was creating a bit of distraction. Then, I zoomed in to focus on detailing the eye area. I added highlights along with some skin folds to give it more realism. If someone asked me what my favorite part of digital art is, I'd easily say the eyes. Eyes have their own character, and they're always fun to paint. I also refined the skin around the eyes to make everything feel more connected and natural. Also did some rough work on the eyebrows. Honestly, it looks a bit creepy without them. I then refined the skin further to better define the structure of the face, adding shadows and highlights where needed. If you've been watching so far and found this video helpful, please give it a like. For more digital art content, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to learn how to improve your coloring, check out my video on coloring your art step by step. And if you want to see more full process videos, you can watch my video on my complete digital art process. Feel free to tell me in the comments which topic you'd like me to cover next. Back to the artwork. I did some additional rendering and refined the shapes to make the overall structure look much better. I also rendered the eye bags and added some additional folds on the skin to give more depth and realism to the face. Next, I worked on the wrinkles in the forehead area. I used hard lines with a darker tone to create the effect of wrinkles. This portrait has quite a few wrinkles since the character is an older man, probably in his 50s or 60s. These subtle details help add age and character to his face. Moved on to more refining work on my artwork, though this stage isn't always very noticeable. Basically, I look at my reference and do some polishing, adding shadows, adjusting highlights, or quickly defining certain facial features. This process varies from person to person, and there's no strict rule. While I was refining, I'd like to share a few tips. Always add a subtle shadow under the lips. Add a small highlight near the tear duct. Never paint the eyes pure white. It's a common rookie mistake. Avoid making colors too dark directly. Instead, move toward a colder tone and increase saturation with darkness. Do the opposite for highlights. If you post your art on social media, don't post it immediately after finishing. Wait a few hours and then review your piece. It often helps you spot mistakes you missed before. While chatting with you, I also did some additional rendering and refinements on my artwork. Next, I focused on the lips. I filled the area with a dark red color, keeping the lower lip a bit lighter than the upper lip. This mimics how lighting naturally affects the lips, giving them more depth and realism. I started working on the eyes by selecting the area and filling it in. As I mentioned before, we never use pure white for the eyes. I added shadows to the upper part of the eyes and repeated the same steps for the other eye. Next, I applied a dark red base for the eyeballs and laid down the base color. I also added some details resembling eyelashes and placed highlights, since the character looks lifeless without them. I did additional rendering around the eye bags to enhance depth. I made the eyebrows more dominant as well, and now I'll repeat the same steps for the other eye. Now, I moved on to the beard. Since the character has only a light beard, I didn't go heavy with it. I selected the beard area and applied a dark yellow tone, which reads slightly greenish. Using an airbrush, I softly glazed the area to give it a natural, subtle look. Finally, I added some texture with a textured brush to make the beard appear more realistic and detailed. Once the beard was done, I focused on the neck and ears, adding shadows, highlights, and subtle details to make them match the overall lighting and structure of the face. After that, I focused on the hair. I added highlights and shadows to define its shape and structure. This part was fairly quick and easy, since I wasn't doing any heavy detailing. Once the hair was done, I focused on the clothing, adding shadows, highlights, and subtle folds to give it depth and a realistic look. And with that, the artwork is finally complete. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this process or found it helpful, don't forget to like the video. For more digital art content and full process videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.